Welcome to episode 2 of the Beyond the Guitar podcast, where we help you play the music that you love and talk about all things guitar and beyond. I'm Nathan Mills, joined with my co-host, Jeremiah Diaz. How's it going, Jeremiah?
Hey, what's up, Nathan? How's it going, man? How was your week?
It's been good. We were talking about this earlier. We're actually moving houses, so my studio is in a very transitional space right now, and I actually had the first opportunity in a very long time to work outside of the home, which I guess I say opportunity ironically because I love working from home, and that was kind of always a dream of mine. But there's always been that struggle that I know many people are feeling right now of working from home with kids at home. And so especially in an environment when I'm recording a lot and it has to be quiet, I worked out of the home in this townhouse that a family member's letting us use while we're looking for a new place. And it was like eerily quiet. It was very weird.
Oh, man. Yeah, dude, I've been working from home for like a month now, and it's so weird.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels like all the days blend together. Well, I mean, I think it's accentuated by the fact that like you're not really supposed to go anywhere.
Yeah.
But oh man, yeah, it's a trip. I'm actually working out of my brother's kitchen because he lives downstairs from us. We live in a fourplex, and so he's been gracious enough to let me use his kitchen. He's a bachelor, so I work for a communications company, like cloud communications, phone systems and stuff. So I literally have like 20 phones in his kitchen. It's absurd.
Well, and that's so many people on YouTube right now, like entrepreneurs and stuff, are making videos about how to work from home and how to be productive working from home because that's such a big deal right now. And we had some people asking about us covering that on the podcast, so we might talk about that in future episodes as well. Just kind of, I think it would be interesting because you're new to that, and so you can relate to all the other people who have just been thrown into it. And I've been doing it for a while, so I have some insights, although I still, admittedly do not have it all figured out by any means. But yeah, so I feel for all the people who are just thrown into it without dedicated spaces, because that really does make all the difference.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do if my brother didn't live downstairs, to be honest with you, especially because I have 2 kids, and one's a 3-year-old, one's an almost 1-year-old, so I don't know what I'd do. So I feel pretty bad for my wife, but luckily my brother is on paid leave, and he's actually been taking care of, or just kind of like watching my oldest son, Pax, after noonish. So whenever Pax wakes up from his nap time, he usually comes downstairs and he like hangs out in the living room, and he's pretty good about not giving me too much trouble about working. I feel bad because it's like I'm ignoring my child. He's trying to come up and play with me and stuff, but I'm like, sorry, kid, I can't play right now. It's like, I feel kind of guilty, but got to pay the bills still. But yeah, I've been watching some YouTube videos here and there, not going to lie.
Yeah.
Pretty stoked about Streets of Rage 4.
That's right.
I know you're stoked about that.
Yeah, we were talking about that. When's that? What's that coming out? This in a week or two?
I think the 30th, April 30th, something like that.
Right. Yeah, that brings it back to, I remember we played Streets of Rage, what is it, Streets of Rage 2?
Yeah.
Back in high school?
On Dreamcast, yeah.
Yeah.
On that crappy disc or whatever.
Yeah, it was like a greatest hits kind of disc that had all these classic games that would only work like 1 out of 20 attempts.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, that kind of ties into what we wanted to talk about with this week's episode, nostalgia, and specifically nostalgia's role in music and in the arrangements that I do for Beyond the Guitar, among other things. Jeremiah and I were talking about Streets of Rage 4, and you watch the gameplay for these games, and it's even the sound effects, the music, the sound effects, all of it. You hear that and you're like instantly transported back to, high school or even earlier when, we played these games growing up, and it's just such a powerful thing. And so again, in today's episode, we wanted to talk about, how nostalgia can, how we can leverage that for our audience as musicians, and just it's such a powerful emotion, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, with Streets of Rage specifically, I remember playing that at my cousin's house when I was like, I don't know, I was probably 4 or 5, 6 on the Sega Genesis, and I loved that game. And the music was like techno, hip hop influenced video game music, and it was sick because that's the kind of music that I liked growing up anyway. And then more recently, my brother had it on PS3. He had like a Sega game pack or whatever,
right?
And we ended up beating it for the first time like a few years ago.
Nice.
It was pretty cool.
Scratch that off the bucket list.
Yeah. To be honest, it was a little bit anticlimactic, but
after all these years,
I was like, after like 20 years of waiting to beat this freaking game, but I'm pretty stoked to play it. But yeah, man, I'm stoked about the music. Hopefully the music's good. I know that they're gonna have like options for you to choose to play the old music in the background along with the new, whatever new soundtracks they're making.
Well, yeah, that, and so specifically in soundtracks, I think nostalgia plays an even stronger role in, video game soundtracks and movie soundtracks and, TV shows and all that. And that's what I feel like I've kind of capitalized on with my arrangements. But it's definitely not limited to that. I think, nostalgia can play a role in any type of music. It's just a matter of when and where you listen to that music and the experiences you have tied to it. But the, video games and movies, they kind of have that experience built into the music, right? Because the soundtracks are accompanying an experience in and of itself. Yeah,
it's true, man. Nostalgia's a crazy influence on me when I listen to the music that I like. But for yourself, do you think that the nostalgic value of your pieces are kind of what got your audience to grow the way that it did?
Yeah, I think nostalgia was a huge selling point on what I did, because if you, like, let's say I was starting a YouTube channel and a career as a musician, just composing original music, which a lot of people do, and more power to them. I mean, I chose arranging, we talked about that a little bit last episode, because I genuinely loved it. But the plus side of it is that you can essentially piggyback, for lack of a better word, piggyback off of your listeners and your audience's past experience with this music. Whereas if you're just producing just original content and original music, not only do you have to produce something that's of quality, but you have to essentially create that memorable experience that's going to keep them coming back just from the music in and of itself, because your audience doesn't have history with that music. And so starting out my channel, when I picked things like Star Wars music, which is just so iconic and it's a part of literally generations of people's childhood, the history is already there. People already care about that music, and if I'm able to produce something of quality along with that, that really, I think it's a recipe for a really invested audience.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I love a lot of the pieces that you have done that that I grew up with. Like, I think about Braveheart. That was a movie. I think that was the first movie that I watched. I probably watched it when I was like 8 or something, which I probably should not have.
Yeah, that's a rough one.
Again, thanks to my brother for introducing that movie to me. But I think that was the first movie that I really noticed the music, and I was like, man, this music is awesome.
Yeah, I love that soundtrack. The
bagpipes and even though apparently the historical. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. I like Braveheart. It's still a good movie,
right?
But yeah, a lot of the pieces that are my favorite of yours, that go way back for me, and that's been a really cool thing to experience. Because a lot of times I wouldn't necessarily go back to the music score. I usually just experience it when I watch the movie. I know a lot of people are fans of just listening to music scores. That's not me, but so anyway, yeah, it's been cool to kind of relive those experiences through your channel.
Right. So you're saying a lot of people are into listening to the scores just alone, like without watching the movie or without ever having watched the movie?
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that people are into listening to the score after having seen the movie, which I'm not a big person that does that, but
right.
I do go back to a lot of your pieces that I kind of grew up with.
Oh, shucks.
Yeah, Braveheart, Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
Gladiator. There's a lot of new ones too that like I've had to kind of develop a liking for, but those are some of my favorites too. I think that's kind of hard to navigate with nostalgia in mind. Like, I think if people don't have a connection with a piece of music, they won't give it a chance, and that's kind of unfortunate. But like a lot of the pieces of music that you've done, like Monster Hunter World is one, Kingdom Hearts is another one. Just some of those kind of more mellow, emotional sounding ones. Those are some of my favorites now. Right. And I didn't have I hadn't played the games. I didn't have any emotional connection or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a huge testament to the composers for these video games specifically, is that, the music can stand alone in its own right. Of course, like you're saying, I mean, the nostalgia is what I think maybe brings a lot of people there in the first place. But for people who are willing to give the music a chance without that context, can still hear that, this music is gorgeous and can stand alone.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, I think there's a lot of music that I still listen to today that probably if I listened to it for the first time today, I'd be like, oh man, this is trash. But because I either grew up with it or I listened to it at a specific moment in my life, my oldest brother, Tony, used to show us like Christian electronic music way back in the day. And it's like nice. pretty cheesy, like really, really cheesy music. Yeah. But I listen to it now and I'm like, oh man, this is awesome. I love this song. But if I listen to it for the first time today, I'd be like, oh man, this is so cringy. But so it's interesting how nostalgia plays a role in all of those things.
Well, yeah. So I mean, piggybacking off of that, I would ask you then, so do you think that the nostalgic value of a piece of music can often outweigh the quality of the music? Or, well, I don't really like using the word quality for music. I guess I don't think it's something you can necessarily qualify, but do you think maybe nostalgia overrides our personal taste? So like you're saying, like it's music that we loved as a kid, or it was music that was tied into a movie or a video game that we played as a kid. And, the music itself, we might not be that into, especially today, but it's that nostalgia factor because we have that history with it and because we've got that connection that now we still listen to that music and still love it for that reason.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have that with all kinds of music in my own life. Again, a lot of electronic music, especially like growing up with like trance and stuff in the early 2000s, is like a lot of that music is really, again, really cheesy. Right. But I listen to it now, it's like, oh man, it's taking me back to like middle school or whatever. Right. And some of the days in middle school I'd rather forget, but so, some of them are still pretty fun memories to look back on. But it's really interesting how that works.
Yeah, like I mean, if I even think about like Mario music, right? Like that style of music really does nothing for me. Like, it's like right 8-bit ragtime or, like I don't even know what genre you would call it, but still you listen to that and it has like a special place in your heart because it does, it takes me back to like those early days of when I didn't have a Nintendo and I would go over to like my cool older neighbor's house, and he had a Nintendo and we would play Mario together, trading off the controller and stuff. And it's like those experiences just come flooding back when you hear that super memorable music. But going back to, how I feel like nostalgia played a role in building my, the Beyond the Guitar brand and the YouTube channel, I feel like one of the first moments where I remember people starting to buy into what I was doing, I feel like you're starting to get some momentum when, like when you're first starting, you've got your friends and your family who are kind of like pushing your stuff out there, going to bat for you. And then you're just trying to reach out to just random people on the internet to hope that they'll watch your videos and buy into what you're doing. But initially it's just friends and family. But I distinctly remember when I put out the Ocarina of Time main theme. So the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which is, again, another really beautiful theme that's super nostalgic for people who've played the game. I distinctly remember it was like a friend of a friend who we were friends on Facebook, but we weren't really that tight or anything. They shared it and they said, hearing this brought me to tears and reminded me of, playing this game with my brother, when we were however many years old. And I saw that and I was like, wow. Cause I knew that there was no bias, going into that with friends and family. You never know how much of it is they really genuinely love it or they're just trying to help out,
right.
Which is, it's totally fine. You appreciate the support wherever you can get it. But when people that are out of that immediate circle start buying into it, then you're kind of striking a nerve. And, I'd like to think that, of course, part of it was the quality of what I was doing. But obviously, a big part of it was that I was playing music that had real history with this person and carried this emotional weight. And that was really impactful for me.
Yeah, the Ocarina of Time theme is one of my favorites that you've done. I actually listened to it today while I was working.
Oh, nice.
I always had to skip the end part where you're going on a long ramble about how it was so impactful for you, though.
Oh, yeah, I can't listen to those. I can't listen to the end of my videos. That's why I don't do that anymore. To hit on also what you were saying before about when you don't have that history with music and you don't have that nostalgia, you kind of have to give it a chance. That's been an interesting learning experience for me as well, throughout making these videos and making these arrangements, because a lot of the stuff that I do, of course, I do have that history with, but there are certain things that, some video games that I make arrangements for that I've never played, or some movies that I've never watched, but I know that it's, things that people want. So like recently I just did Final Fantasy VII Aerith's theme, alongside with the Final Fantasy VII remake that just came out. And it's one of those things that I knew this has a lot of nostalgic value for people. It doesn't have that for me. So you almost have to get in the head of the people who have this experience, this history with this music. And, I always do a little bit of research about the significance of the theme, what character it's based on, if it is kind of a character theme, or when it plays in the story. And I always get a little bit of that history so I can almost try to feel like secondhand nostalgia in a way. And I try to reverse engineer what my audience is going to feel. And so that can, dictate how I'm going to arrange something where, I might try to, put a little spin on the ending of the arrangement in a way that I know is going to kind of tug at their heartstrings. And so it's been interesting to explore that world of nostalgia in music that I personally don't have that same investment in, other than the fact that it is, again, just beautiful music that can stand alone on its own right.
Yeah, man. That's definitely one that I grew up playing. I had a friend in middle school that I used to play Final Fantasy VII with, so that was awesome to hear. Another one that I know that you didn't necessarily have as much connection to was Full Metal Alchemist.
Right.
And I know that that was the one that I asked, like, hey, Nathan, you should do this one, man. This song is awesome. And it didn't perform very well, but I greatly appreciate it. Yeah. Because that song is so beautiful and has a lot of nostalgic value for me.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing too, is that a lot of these pieces, you know, that I arrange that do have that nostalgic value often don't perform as well, because usually what's going to perform the best, at least in my experience, is newer, more current and like relevant things.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like most recently, The Mandalorian, or Toss a Coin to Your Witcher, which is going to be stuck in everybody's heads now just by even mentioning that. But like those are my most recent videos that have kind of popped more. But I feel like what happens is, you know, so you're riding a wave of hype with those. Like even if people love the shows, and, you know, Mandalorian especially, I feel like was awesome. And the theme, you know, I thought was really cool. But there's no nostalgia there. Like nostalgia needs some time to develop. And so you're riding this wave of hype that, you know, we can talk about that in other episodes as far as like, you know, viral content, how it kind of comes and goes. But once this hype wave goes, there's no real long-term investment there. Whereas if I do something that, you know, is, you know, back from the archives, you know, like a Legend of Zelda tune or a Final Fantasy tune that has this nostalgic, you know, capital built up and investment in the people who are listening, I feel like that's where you get like the diehards, like the people who are ride or die on your content, and the people who are really bought into what you're doing because you provided them with a really memorable emotional experience that ties back to, you know, moments in their childhood. And so there's a trade-off, right? You know, you're not getting the views, but you're cultivating this meaningful relationship, I guess, in a sense with your audience. And that's arguably way more valuable. Yeah.
From personal experience, I definitely tend to connect more with the less popular of your arrangements.
Right. I mean, and me too.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. And this is something that we've talked about before, Nathan. I don't understand why. I mean, nostalgia aside, because, you know, you kind of, like you were saying, you kind of have to have a test of time to, you know, see if musical piece is going to last.
Right.
Or even a piece of art, like whether that's a movie or TV show or video game or whatever. But we've talked about how like a lot of newer movies, not all, but a lot of new movies, that the scores are just so bland and like cookie cutter and like not memorable. One of the most recent ones that did have an amazing score was Joker.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
We've geeked out about that a lot.
Yeah, yeah, we have.
And I well, go ahead. I'll hit that after.
Oh, no. I was just going to ask you how you felt about like these big budget movies that come out and they're like the score is like, where is the art and the music? And you know, a lot of times it's very talented composers that are working on these movies, right. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the director or what, but and I have seen a couple YouTube videos like explaining what's going on, like people using temp scores and stuff, and then the composers have to come in and kind of like emulate the scores that were already edited too. So I get those kinds of things, but it's really frustrating. Like you feel like, man, this movie has so much emotional impact with people already. Like you could make this that much more impactful if you had a memorable score that could last the test of time.
Right. Yeah, I think it plays such a huge factor in how memorable that movie or that game is going to be. And I don't understand why, you know, some studios seem to underestimate that. I don't know the business that goes into that, because I'm sure it all comes down to, I don't know, maybe it comes down to money at the end of the day. I remember watching, we've talked about this too, a video that was kind of like an expose on they used a lot of Marvel movies as an example of, they quoted, I believe it was, I don't remember who it was, but it was a composer that they said or a sound director or something. They said that their philosophy for their movie was that music should be felt and not heard.
Right.
Which I can buy into that philosophy at times. Obviously, like if you have, if you're trying to hit like iconic melodies and, super memorable musical moments, throughout a 2-hour movie. Like, if everything's quote memorable, nothing's going to be memorable,
right?
In a sense, like it has to ebb and flow. So, I mean, I get that, but to have that as just a blanket statement for your entire film it just feels like you're missing the mark. And, I've seen so many people, even just comments on my channel about like, people saying, oh man, like hearing this made me go out and buy the game again. Or hearing this made me go, watch this movie again. Like, I mean, that's, money talks, and it's like these soundtracks are a way to keep people coming back to your product, whether that's a movie or a game. So yeah, I don't understand why some people seem not to buy into that. And I feel like there's definitely, like you said, like Joker came out and is like, that score just blew my socks off, man. It was so good. And I desperately wanted to arrange something from that movie. That was kind of like, that's one of those, I feel like it's like the one that got away, where I loved it so dearly that I had to let it go because it just felt inauthentic. I was trying to arrange something and it just wasn't translating well to the guitar. And I felt that if I just forced it just because of the hype around the movie, that wouldn't be, I don't know, I wouldn't feel okay with that because
it'd be a disservice to the score.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, because I cared about it that much that, and I thought it was that beautiful. I didn't want to do anything that wouldn't do it justice. So yeah, there are certainly composers out there and games and movies that are coming out that are producing great scores. But it did feel like a while there. I felt like there was a while where it was happening less and less. And I was worried that this was just going to be this like downward trend where this was no longer, the age of memorable scores was over. But
yeah, at least for movies.
Yeah.
And there's been, like you said, there has been some glimmers of hope for me. I think over the years, I'm thinking back over like the last decade, and my favorite movies of the last decade have had the best scores in my mind. Like I think of something like Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah.
It's not something I would necessarily listen to, like, just at work or whatever.
Right.
But like that score was so good.
Yeah.
It could just be the way that it like meshed with the movie. Another one, Joker, was like amazing. So there's like these glimmers of hope for me where I'm like, okay, some composers still get it, like and directors, because ultimately it does need to come from the director. But yeah. And another thing, we've been watching the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings over kind of like doing like a mini series type of deal because awesome. We don't have anything to do at night.
Yeah.
And the Hobbit was better than I remember, which was a pleasant surprise because I remember thinking like, it's whatever, but the music is great. And then you get to Lord of the Rings. So we finished the Hobbit trilogy, and now we're halfway through the Fellowship extended edition,
right?
Because of course you gotta do extended edition.
Yeah, I mean, why bother with anything else? It's like eating Oreos that aren't double stuffed.
Yeah, but one thing I didn't notice before was Howard Shore somehow like in the Hobbit he didn't overplay the old themes. Like he would hint at like the Shire. He definitely did the Shire a lot.
Yeah.
But like there were certain themes that he would hint at in the Hobbit series, and then there were other new themes like the themes for the dwarves, the themes for like Legolas and the elves and stuff.
Yeah.
But then I'm watching Lord of the Rings, and it's like, man, he did so much with the score to like kind of, I don't know, the way that he did it seems like The Hobbit is indeed a precursor to Lord of the Rings. And I don't know how he did it, but like just, it feels like the music for The Hobbit was made before Lord of the Rings, but that's not the case.
That's
it was like,
really cool.
15 years. It was like 15 years beforehand or whatever, but
yeah, I'd have to go back cause I've never watched them in that order like that. So that's interesting. I haven't thought of it that way.
It's actually cool. Yeah, it's actually kind of cool that I'm going to nerd out for a little bit, but like you can kind of see how like Saruman is like turning dark, and like Gandalf is such a main character, and like you have when Gandalf like meets Bilbo at the front door, like there's all this like history there. It's kind of cool. Again, I was pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed the Hobbit series going back to it after having like a kind of a letdown. Again, there are some very definitely parts that I'm like, ugh, that's kind of cringy, or it's just like I don't know why they added that in there. But
yeah,
anyway.
I tend to be more forgiving about stuff like that. It depends on how far it goes down that route. Like personally, I was just happy to have more like just Tolkien and Peter Jackson. So I was happy to look past a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's things we can nitpick about for sure. And, you know, but a few things about all that, like I would say for me, Lord of the Rings is probably one of the most like nostalgia inducing soundtracks for me. Like, you know, concerning hobbits.
It's crazy, man. It came out like 20 years ago. We were mere babes.
It's nuts. And how well it holds up still to this day too is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a perfect example, like the Shire theme, you know, concerning hobbits, where like he weaves that in and out of the score to where it, you know, it's just so brilliantly incorporated to where like, you know, they mention home, and you know that theme pops up, and so you have this connection with like, you know, the home and this homesickness and this desire to go home and the simplicity of earlier days before all this happened, and like, you know, it kind of gets tied back to your own history of like simpler days of when we were younger and like things like that, and it's such a powerful thing, and kind of similar to the Joker. I don't know if you remember this, but I waited a long time to do Lord of the Rings on my channel for that very reason too, that it was so near and dear to my heart that I didn't want to settle for anything less than what I felt was, you know, quote, perfect. But I wanted to do something that that was really special and that I could put my stamp on, because, you know, that Lord of the Rings and that soundtrack was so impactful for me. So yeah, it took me a long time. And even then, like, I didn't do Concerning Hobbits first. I still like held off on that a little bit longer.
Yeah. The Riders of Rohan.
Yeah, I did Riders of Rohan first, which is, you know, is awesome.
Yeah.
Theme in and of itself. But, and the other kind of a fun fact here too, that not many people know, talking back at for the Hobbit, you know, I get goosebumps anytime, like just that clip where they all start, you know, standing up and singing Misty Mountains.
Oh yeah, dude. So good.
I sing that song every night to my son, Titus, when he goes to bed. Like that's how big of a nerd I am. Yeah. I did. It's like, I don't remember. I randomly started it like, you know, 2 years ago, and literally every night. And, you know, he hasn't seen the movies or anything yet. Like, you know, he's only 3, but they, just for fun, I did one day, I pulled up the YouTube, like a YouTube video, just a clip of them singing that. And he just like, he was like so weirded out. He got wide eyes. He was like, that's Daddy's song. And he's like shocked as like why these people on this YouTube video were singing his bedtime song.
Yeah, dude, that's another thing about nostalgia. I can't wait to share these things with my kids. Like watching the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings trilogy, I'm like, or trilogies, I'm like, man, I cannot wait to like share these things with my kids. Like watching the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings trilogies again, I'm like, man, this is gonna be so awesome to share this with my kids. And I think that's probably what a lot of like, you know, probably Star Wars parents feel, you know, the ones that grew up with the original trilogy, like,
yeah, exactly,
or felt anyway, because a lot of them have kids that have grown already. But like, yeah, just like this feeling like, man, I can't wait to share these groundbreaking movies with my kids. Yeah,
and you know, I think kids feed off of that, that excitement, that energy that we have going into it. You know, I think that is why, like, you know, there's generations of Star Wars families out there that, you know, we all have that nostalgia growing up because, you know, our parents introduced us to Star Wars, you know, when we were little. And
yeah,
it's really interesting. I had my first experience of what I feel like was witnessing a kid feeling nostalgia for the first time this past year. Because you think about it, like we talked about, nostalgia has to, be created over time. And so there has to be a point, right, where kids experience nostalgia for the first time because they haven't been around long enough to feel nostalgic about anything. But I had a student who was geeking out about the Fortnite videos that I did, because he was all into to playing Fortnite. And we were talking about, so in the game, there was an original theme song that maybe, I don't know, 6 months or, a year maybe into the game, they changed the theme song. They changed like the main menu theme to something else. And so all these kids that are playing these games, there's this shift to where they started to think back to kind of the golden era of Fortnite when it was all new and fresh. And he was talking about, he's like, yeah, when I hear this, there's YouTube videos of this original theme song, and when I hear it, I feel weird. It's like it makes me like happy but kind of sad too. Like I can't really explain it. And it's like, that's nostalgia. And he like didn't really know how to put it into words. So it's kind of funny to think like, I feel like this probably makes me sound like an old jaded man, but it's it's like kids these days are going to experience Fortnite as their Legend of Zelda. Or like they're like the games that we grew up that to us are like so memorable and iconic, and the music when we hear that, we're teleported back. Like, this current, generation of kids that are growing up, if 10 years down the line somebody throws up the, original Fortnite main theme song, they're going to be like have those warm, fuzzy nostalgia feelings, in the same way that we do. So it's just, it's kind of it's a heck of a thing.
Yeah, man. My brother and I have been really into playing Heroes of Might and Magic 3, which is a very niche game. But we started with Heroes of Might and Magic 2, and that has some beautiful, beautiful music. The music is very dated in terms of instrumentation because of the way it was recorded. It's probably like using cheap MIDI synths.
And honestly, I'll let you keep going, but that's part of the nostalgia too, is that you'll find, it's like that, whatever 16-bit, 32-bit, like old school video games, like that's part of it. That's built into it. Yeah,
man. And we love the music to those games. And here, so we've been playing a lot of Heroes 3, and it's actually kind of interesting because apparently it's like really big in like Poland and like Russia and stuff. They're like at least still have people working on the games and making mods for it and stuff.
Oh wow!
And it's continuously updated, which is nuts. Esteban got it on GOG, but that's my brother. Esteban got it on GOG, but yeah, we've been playing, and it's kind of interesting because my son Pax is old enough to where he can kind of like he knows what we're doing now, and my brother has a massive TV and he plugs his computer up to that.
Nice.
And so like we just. Even just like the sound effects, like of picking up some resources or whatever, like super nerdy things. It's like, man, we love this game. Like it just takes us back to being like kids again. And I know you're a fan of that series too, Nathan. But one of these days we got to play Heroes 3 because I know you haven't played that one yet.
I know. I just want an old school like LAN party.
Yeah, dude.
Some Heroes right now.
We should.
And that's the thing too. Jeremiah has been like trying to convince me to make an arrangement from Heroes 2 for a long time. And the thing is, I really want to, because I do have that nostalgic value, but I'm caught in that YouTuber's game of like, oh, it's not going to get any views. And, so
it used to be
eventually
music,
I'm going to break. Such a sellout. And that
You've changed, Nathan.
YouTube has changed you.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I do struggle with that balance. I'll be honest. Like, it's something I encourage.
Yeah, man, you gotta make money.
Yeah, when it does become something that pays the bills, you do have to make those tough calls sometimes. And but I do think it's important to have a balance. And there are times where I'll do like passion projects per se that I know aren't going to really take off. But also, like I talked about, it's very possible that if I do Heroes of Might and Magic, I'm going to get those diehards that we were talking about that are like, it might, only get a few thousand views, but those few thousand people are going to be like sold for life on all things beyond the guitar because I did what no one else would. and I covered Heroes of Might and Magic. Although, oh my gosh, I'm gonna butcher his name, and I love this. I love this man, Lucas Kapuscinski. I believe is his name. A great.
Oh, on YouTube, the guitarist.
Yeah, he's
he's
phenomenal,
awesome.
phenomenal guitarist, classical guitar, and he makes arrangements. You know, we're colleagues, as it were. I believe, didn't I send it to you? I think he did a Heroes thing.
Yeah, he did
Sometime this past
really
year, and it was so good, so good. So all y'all should follow him because he stayed true to the art when I've gone astray.
Another one is Sam Griffin. He's got a really niche audience, but they're pretty diehard, man. His Patreon page is crazy.
Freaking Sam. I love that man.
Dude, the funniest video. So he put up a Mario 2, I think, video recently. I think it's Mario 2.
That was nuts.
The song that goes bip 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 bip, you know.
That's right.
And I showed that to my wife, and at the end of the video, he's like, "So, if you want to learn this beginner's guitar song," and I started busting out laughing, and my wife was like, "Is he serious?" I'm like, no,
he's never serious.
He's kidding.
I know, I love it. He's a genius. Anyway. I could go into that whole like how he like pitches Patreon in such a genius way. I love Sam. We joked, it was like probably over a year ago, where he was like giving me a hard time because I passed him up on, you know, numbers in Patreon, and like now he is just like zoomed past me. But he is awesome. He's great. We gotta like collaborate one of these days.
That'd be dope.
But yeah, no, he is definitely hitting hard on the nostalgia factor because he does lots of those like classic video games. And yeah, to your point, like you said, like he's got these, you know, it's more niche because, you know, he's not hitting all the really current stuff, but it's really paid off well for him because he's got this, you know, audience of these diehards that we're talking about, because he's hit them with all this like nostalgia and done it at such a high level of quality that you can't help but buy into what he's doing.
Yeah, hits them right in the feels, as they say.
Right in the feels. That's how you do it. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really know if there's like a lesson here or anything, but I do think
that you need to do a Heroes 2 arrangement.
The moral of the story
is
that I need to do a Heroes. Y'all heard it here.
Specifically the ocean theme one.
That is good.
Or the grass theme.
Yeah, well,
there's a lot of themes. Just choose one, Nathan.
I'll choose one. Yeah, we'll make it happen eventually, one of these days.
I don't believe you.
Oh man, but you know, I think there's a reason why you see so many people who start as arrangers or cover artists and then pivot into originals. And I guess maybe there's something to be said there for anybody listening who is maybe interested in building an audience or pursuing a career in music. A lot of people have this kind of look down on making arrangements or making covers, and it's looked at sometimes as not as, you know, creative, or you're not a true artist if you're not composing something that's in a completely original work. And again, I think if you are going to make arrangements and you're going to cover songs, you do want to do it for the right reasons. You want to be passionate about it. But it is also a legitimate tool to build an audience, you know, because of that reason that we talked about, where you're playing music that people already care about, right? You don't have to sell them on the music itself. You just have to sell them on you and what you can bring to that music. And that's what ultimately Beyond the Guitar has been built on, and will be, you know, continued to be built on, because it's nostalgia is a powerful thing, man.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many shows I've been to where, like, local shows where like a band will be playing their own stuff and the crowd doesn't really care, and then they bust out like a Weezer track or something, and then everyone goes crazy, and then after that they're kind of for the rest of the show, like the audience is like bought in.
Right. Yeah. You kind of
it's a trip.
That's right. You reel them in a little bit. You play a little bit of Freebird, okay, and then you can go into your like, whatever your niche.
Actually, one of the coolest covers I ever seen live from like a local band was this is gonna be really random, so sorry, but they did a cover of a Bjork song called Unravel.
Shout out Bjork.
And that song is, yeah, dude, that song is so beautiful. And they did it as a rock band, but it was like still atmosphere, because if you listen to the track, it's like very atmospheric. But I wasn't into the band at all. And then they played that song, and I was like, wow, they're doing this. They're doing a really good job with this song. So I like, after that, I was like paying attention like into the music. So
right.
It works, man.
Yeah, that's textbook. So yeah, on that note, I feel like that's Bjork is as good a place as any to wrap up this episode. Bjork, as it were.
She appeals to all the gamers and,
that's right.
and movie nerds.
But yeah, Jeremiah, why don't you tell everybody kind of where they can find you on the internet?
Yeah, man. You can find me, just look for Chomachi, Chomachi. I have like a single out. I'm going to really be releasing more music soon. And then I make music with a buddy of mine. I'm in a band. I play drums called Junko. That's Junco. And we're actually working on like an ambient, like little EP that people can like relax to during this like weird time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty cool. We'll be releasing that within the next week or two. So
awesome.
I'll let you guys know when it's out.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's going to be great. And for me, of course, you can find me anywhere beyond the guitar. We would love to hear from you. If you have things you'd like to hear us talk about in the future, you can always reach out to me on Instagram under Beyond the Guitar, or tweet at me on Twitter, Beyond the Guitar. If you want to learn how to make your own classical or fingerstyle guitar arrangements like I do, you can go to my website, beyondtheguitar.com. I have a free training there called Fretboard Freedom, which is a great way to get started. But thank you guys so much for listening. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, if you could rate the show and leave us a review, that helps out a ton. But we will see you next week for another episode. As always, much love, and we'll see you then.